mother, Alida de Carmen Mir, was born in a small town also named Mir in Cuba to a family who had two farms, Flores and Limonar. She grew up in the lush and fertile valley at the foot of the Sierra Maestras, amidst a picturesque landscape of green mountains, steep hillsides, and ample rivers that fed the many farms in the area. Mir got its name because my great-great-grandfather donated a plot of his land for a train station so that local farmers could load their crops to send to Havana or to Santiago. Soon a small town grew around that loading station, or apartadero, and that's why my mom and the town share the same name. As was customary in those days, most farming families in Mir also had a home in nearby Holguín. Nicknamed the City of Parks, my mom lived on Calle Libertad, or Liberty Street, in a typical colonial house with many lush gardens and brightly colored walls. Catty-corner from their home, and in full view of my mother's bedroom window, was Parque Infantil, a large grassy area with plenty of trees that offer cool shade to take refuge from summer's oppressive sun. It had a bandstand where people listened to music, and a playground for kids. And it even had a small zoo with curious animals from around the surrounding area. A lush place to escape the heat of the day, and a community focal point for leisurely activities. As a daughter of a landed family, my mother had nothing to want, and one must admit she was a bit spoiled. She had helpers who put her out her clothes, tell her stories, make her lunch, and take her shopping around town. She bought pretty dresses, colorful blouses, and natty shoes. My mother liked horses, and she would ride them on the farm and around town, even though they had two cars, unheard of in those days. She had a very comfortable, if not fantastic, life. In 1959, all that changed. There was a revolution in Cuba, and the government said they were going to take over all the farms. Like many other Cubans, she fled with her family, first to Puerto Rico, then to New Orleans, before finally arriving in New York City. Here in the city, in West Harlem, she met my father and married in 1960. They had 3 boys, and I'm the middle one. I was 13 when my father passed away. Suddenly my mother, Alida, was a single mom raising 3 boys in Harlem. And in the 1970s, this was not an easy thing. Now my mother had to work to support us. She cleaned apartments in the oldest and richest neighborhoods in all of New York, Sutton Place. When I look back on it, I think, oh my God, how did she do it? How did she bring up 3 boys, sending 2 off to college and 1 to vocational school? I remember there were a lot of tough times. 3 boys can be very unruly, but my mother was very strong-willed. She knew when to be very strict with us. When we finished school, my other 2 brothers left home, one to Brooklyn and the other to Kentucky. After raising her 3 sons, suddenly, my mother had an empty nest with nothing to do. She had a dog, though, a beagle named Cachita Lula Palma. Dogs, like people my mother believed, had to have full proper names. Cachita loved to sit on the windowsill and look at people in the street below. I'm pretty sure it was then, as my mom and Cachita scanned the neighborhood from their 3rd-story perch, that she recalled her childhood home in Cuba and the magnificent park across the street where she spent hours on end playing with friends. As my mother sat with Cachita and looked out towards the green and gray area across the street, Montefiore Park was no such paradise. It was way too dangerous for anyone to sit there, or to enjoy the park in any way. I am sure it was in one of those moments, as my mother and Cachita sat at the window, that she decided, I'm going to do something about this park. This park will be as beautiful as El Parque Infantil. At the time, the new mayor of New York made a promise to clean up the city, and I remember my mom saying, now he's the kind of man that can help me do something about this park. I need to talk to Rudy Giuliani. She picked up the phone and called the mayor. Listen, she said, I woke up this morning and the park was still very dirty. Sanitation did not come in and do the job they were supposed to do. As a matter of fact, I saw them drive right by the park and they didn't even pick up a stitch of garbage. Can you please help us do something about it? And sure enough, within a matter of hours, a sanitation truck came by and cleaned up whatever was needed to be cleaned up. My mom also worked with the NYPD, Mofongo El Valle, a Dominican restaurant, and the Iglesia Bautista de Broadway, and other community residents. Soon, Montefiore Park became a safe place where people felt they could enter and stay for a while. Families came to help clean and beautify the park. Children planted bulbs and learned about sustainable planting. And many just came to enjoy the park because it had space, grass, and shade. My mom wanted to involve the whole community in park activities. They raised $18 million for a redesign and expansion of the park. As with most city projects, the renovation took years over its projected completion. And sadly, my mom never got to see the completed project. Alida de Carmen Mir passed in 2017, and it seemed to me that the mantle of Montefiore Park fell on my shoulders. During and after COVID, just as Montefiore's park redesign finished completion, the neighborhood started facing challenges again. There was no programming at the park. Families and their children stopped coming. Drug dealers came back into the park and garbage began to get piled up. I and many friends and volunteers are working very hard to bring the park back to its former glory, just as my mother did in 1992. All of the work I'm doing now is to continue my mother's legacy and to realize her dream.